Rumi, you ready? You can click director. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Welcome to today's reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are continuing from the second canto, chapter 7, entitled Scheduled Incarnations, verse 39. So we recite Srimad Bhagavatam Mahima Stotra of Sanatana Goswami. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpalam Sarva Siddhantna Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kalidvanto Ditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita Paramananda Patnaya Prema Vakshaksharayate Sarvanda Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishna Namostume Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguru Matmahadana Madnishtaraka Madbhagya Madananda Namostute Asadu Sadutadayin Atinicho Chataraka Hanamuncha Kadachinmam Premna Hrit Kantayospura. Translation. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all of the worlds. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth. My savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing from Canto 2, Chapter 7, Text 39. And welcome everyone. Translation. Hare Krishna. At the beginning of creation, there are penance, myself, Brahma, and the Prajapatis, the great sages who generate. Then, during the maintenance of the creation, there are Lord Vishnu, the demigods with controlling powers, and the kings of different planets. But at the end there is irreligion, and then Lord Shiva and the atheists, full of anger, etc. All of them are different representative manifestations of the energy of the Supreme Power, the Lord. Purport. Rina, you need a book? We can get you. Yeah. This one of the small ones. There's part 2, I guess. Or part 3. Part 2. Yeah, check it. It's there? Found it? So to 739 purport. The material world is created by the energy of the Lord, which is manifested in the beginning of the creation by the penance of Brahmaji, the first living being in the creation. And then there are the 9 Prajapatis, known as great sages. In the stage when the creation is maintained, there are devotional service to Lord Vishnu, or factual religion, the different demigods, and the kings of different planets who maintain the world. At last, when the creation is preparing to wind up, there is first the principle of irreligion, then Lord Shiva along with the atheists, full of anger. But all of them are but different manifestations of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahadev, Shiva, are different incarnations of the different modes of material nature. Vishnu is the Lord of the mode of goodness, Brahma is the Lord of the mode of passion, and Shiva is the Lord of the mode of ignorance. Ultimately, the material creation is but a temporary manifestation meant to give the chance of liberation to the conditioned souls who are entrapped in the material world. And one who develops the mode of goodness under the protection of Lord Vishnu has the greatest chance of being liberated by following the Vaishnava principles and thus being promoted to the kingdom of God, no more to return to this miserable material world. Text 40. Translation. Who can describe completely the prowess of Vishnu? Even the scientist who might have counted the particles of the atoms of the universe cannot do so, because it is he only who in his form of Trivikram moved his leg effortlessly beyond the topmost planet, Satyaloka, up to the neutral state of the three modes of material nature, and all were moved. Purport. The highest scientific advancement of the material scientists is atomic energy, but the material scientist is not able to have an estimation of the particles of atoms contained in the whole universe. But even if one is able to count such atomic particles, or is able to roll up the sky like one's bedding, even then one is unable to estimate the extent of the prowess and energy of the Supreme Lord. He is known as Trivikram because of the material world. There are 7 layers of material coverings over the material sky, and the Lord could penetrate even those coverings. With his toe he made a hole through which the water of the causal ocean filters into the material sky, and the current is known as the sacred Ganges, which purifies the planets of the 3 worlds. In other words, no one is equal to the transcendently powerful Vishnu. He is omnipotent, and no one is equal to or greater than him. Text 41. Neither I, nor all the sages born before you, know fully the omnipotent personality of Godhead. So what can others who are born after us know about him? Even the first incarnation of the Lord, namely Shesha, has not been able to reach the limit of such knowledge, although he is describing the qualities of the Lord with 1,000 faces. Purport. The omnipotent personality of Godhead has primarily 3 potential manifestations, namely internal, external, and marginal potencies, with unlimited expansions of these three energies. As such, the potential expansions can never be calculated by anyone, because even the personality of God himself, as the incarnation of Shesha, cannot estimate the potencies, although he has been describing them continuously with his 1,000 faces. 42. But anyone who is specifically favored by the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, due to unalloyed surrender unto the service of the Lord, can overcome the insurmountable ocean of illusion and can understand the Lord. But those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so. Yeah. Purport. The unalloyed devotees of the Lord know the glories of the Lord in the sense that they can understand how great the Lord is and how great is his expansion of diverse energy. Those who are attached to the perishable body can hardly enter into the realm of the science of Godhead. The whole materialistic world, based on the conception of the material body as the self, is ignorant of the science of God. The materialist is always busy working for the welfare of the material body, not only his own, but also those of his children, kingsmen, community men, countrymen, etc. The materialists have many branches of philanthropic and altruistic activities, from a political, national, and international angle of vision. But none of the field work can go beyond the jurisdiction of the misconception of identifying the body with the spirit soul. Unless, therefore, one is saved from the wrong conception of the body and the soul, there is no knowledge of Godhead. And unless there is knowledge of God, all advancement of material civilization, however dazzling, should be considered a failure.
I have a question. In the 422?
22?
428, so the
That's
42. Yeah.
42. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the purport, like that anyone who favored by the Supreme Lord because of the Godhead due to unalloyed surrender unto the service of the Lord can overcome the unsurmountable sin of illusion. That's I understand. I can understand the Lord.
Which part? Where is that?
Yeah, it's a translation.
Translation.
422.8.
Anyone who is specifically favored this by the Supreme Lord
Yeah.
due to his surrender
Yes.
can overcome this insurmountable ocean of illusion.
Yes.
And can understand the Lord.
This I understand.
This you understand, okay.
Understand.
But this second part.
And can understand the Lord.
The Lord.
It's what is
What?
written.
But those who are attached, this part. Those who are attached to this body,
Yeah.
which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so.
Oh.
At
Oh
this.
yeah, the those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so.
Just in general, so those who are here in material consciousness, those who are thinking they are the body, they're not turned towards God. They are in illusion. They are in body, the concept of life. It's just said in different words. Those who are attached to this body. Are you saying why they cannot understand?
No, I understand that. Well, I understand this part of illusion.
Illusion is very powerful.
Yes.
We see it. Yeah.
You know, it's yeah.
Well, only a purified soul can enter the spiritual existence. So it means purified from the material concept. So it's not even a tinge of material consciousness, anything to do with body and perishable stuff. So that's what it means, turning towards the reality, the truth, the Sat, which is our spiritual existence, spiritual knowledge, and spiritual bliss, and our connection with the Lord, and who He is, and we are eternally connected. Oh, we can talk more later on. If you want to go more, I can. Yeah, we can talk more if you're more detailed. If you have more detailed question. Okay, so text 35 to 45. Translation. O Narada, although the potencies of the Lord are unknowable and immeasurable, still, because we are all surrendered souls, we know how He acts through Yogamaya potencies. And similarly, the potencies of the Lord are also known to the all-powerful Shiva, the great king of the 80th family, namely Prahlad Maharaj, Swayambhuva Manu, his wife Shatarupa, his sons and daughters like Priyavrata, Uttanapada, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti, Prachinabari, Ribu Anga, the father of Vena, Maharaj Dhruva, Ikshvaku, Aila, Muchukunda, Maharaj Janaka, Gadi, Raghu, Ambarish, Sagara, Gaya, Nahusa, Mandata, Alarka, Shatadanve, Anu, Rantideva, Bhishma, Bali, Amurta, Raya, Dilipa, Saubari, Utanka, Shibi, Devala, Pipalada, Sarasvata, Udava, Parashara, Vibhishana, Hanuman, Shukadev Goswami, Arjuna, Artishena, Vidura, Shrutadeva, etc. That one is out of range. Huh?
This one is sometimes out of range.
Yeah, to be closer maybe. Purport. All the great devotees of the Lord, as mentioned above, who flourished in the past or present, and all the devotees of the Lord who will come in the future, are aware of the different potencies of the Lord, along with the potency of his name, quality, pastimes, entourage, personality, etc. And how do they know? Certainly, it is not by mental speculation, nor by any attempt by dint of limited instruments of knowledge. By the limited instruments of knowledge, either the senses or the material instruments like microscopes and telescopes, one cannot even fully know the Lord's material potencies, which are manifest to our eyes. For example, there are many millions and billions of planets far, far beyond the scientist's calculation. But these are only the manifestations of the Lord's material energy. What can the scientist hope to know of the spiritual potency of the Lord by such material efforts? Mental speculations, by adding some dozens of ifs and maybes, cannot aid the advancement of knowledge. On the contrary, such mental speculations will only end in despair by dismissing the cause abruptly and declaring the non-existence of God. The sane person, therefore, ceases to speculate beyond the jurisdiction of his tiny brain, and as a matter of course, he tries to learn to surrender unto the Supreme Lord, who alone can lead one to the platform of real knowledge. In the Upanishads, it is clearly said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead can never be known simply by working very hard and taxing the good brain, nor can he be known simply by mental speculation and jugglery of words. The Lord is knowable by one who is a surrendered soul. Herein Brahmaji, the greatest of all material living beings, acknowledges this truth. Therefore, the fruitless spoiling of energy by pursuing the path of experimental knowledge must be given up. One should gain knowledge by surrendering unto the Lord and by acknowledging the authority of the persons mentioned herein. The Lord is unlimited and, by the grace of the Yogamaya, helps the surrendered soul to know Him proportionately with the advance of one's surrender. Text 46. Surrendered souls, even from groups leading sinful lives, such as women, the laborer class, the mountaineers, and the Siberians, or even the birds and beasts, can also know about the science of Godhead and become liberated from the clutches of the illusory energy by surrendering unto the pure devotees of the Lord and by following in their footsteps in devotional service. Hare Krishna. Purport. Sometimes there are inquiries as to how one can surrender unto the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 1866, the Lord asked Arjuna to surrender unto him, and therefore persons unwilling to do so question where God is and to whom they should surrender. The answer to such questions or inquiries is given herein very properly. The personality of Godhead may not be present before one's eyes, but if one is sincere in wanting such guidance, the Lord will send a bona fide person who can guide one properly back home, back to Godhead. There is no need of material qualifications for making progress on the spiritual realization. In the material world, when one accepts some particular type of service, he is required to possess some particular type of qualification also. Without this, one is unfit for such service. But in the devotional service of the Lord, the only qualification required is surrender. Surrendering oneself is in one's own hand. If one likes, he can surrender immediately without delay, and that begins his spiritual life. The bona fide representative of God is as good as God Himself. Or in other words, the loving representative of the Lord is more kind and more easy to approach. A sinful soul cannot approach the Lord directly, but such a sinful man can very easily approach a pure devotee of the Lord. And if one agrees to put himself under the guidance of such a devotee of the Lord, he can also understand the science of God and can also become like the transcendental pure devotee of the Lord, and thus get his liberation back to Godhead, back home for eternal happiness. So, realization of the science of Godhead and relief from the unnecessary, useless struggle for existence are not at all difficult for the willing candidate. But they are very difficult for persons who are not surrendered souls, but only simple, profitless speculators. 47. Translation. What is realized as the absolute Brahman is full of unreleased without grief. That is certainly the ultimate phase of the Supreme Enjoyer, the Personality of Godhead. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fearless. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter, uncontaminated and with the Supreme Brahman or the Summum Bonum because of his being the supreme cause of all causes. The conception of impersonal Brahman realization is the first step, due to his distinction from the illusory conception of material existence. In other words, impersonal Brahman is a feature of the Absolute, distinct from the material variegatedness, just as light is a conception distinct from its counterpart, darkness. But the light has its variegatedness, which is seen by those who further advance in the light. And thus the ultimate realization of Brahman is the source of the Brahman light, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Summum Bonum, or the ultimate source of everything. Therefore, meeting the Personality of Godhead includes the realization of the impersonal Brahman as realized at first in contrast with material inebriety. The Personality of Godhead is the third step of Brahman realization. As explained in the first canto, one must understand all three features of the Absolute, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Pratibodha Matram is just the opposite conception of material existence. In matter, there are material miseries. And thus, in the first realization of Brahman, there is the negation of such material inebrities, and there is a feeling of eternal existence distinct from the pangs of birth and death, disease and old age. This is the primary conception of impersonal Brahman. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Soul of everything, and therefore, in the Supreme conception, affection is realized. The conception of affection is due to the relationship of soul to soul. A father is affectionate to his son because there is some relationship of nearness between the son and the father. But that sort of affection in the material world is full of inebriety. When the Personality of Godhead is met, the fullness of affection becomes manifested because of the reality of the affectionate relationship. He is not the object of affection by material tinges of body and mind, but he is the full, naked, uncontaminated object of affection for all living entities, because he is the Supersoul or Paramatma within everyone's heart. In the liberated state of affairs, the full-fledged affection for the Lord is awakened. As such, there is an unlimited flow of everlasting happiness without the fear of its being broken as we have experienced here in by words, and there can be no attempt to generate such happiness by fruitive activities or by our arrangements and sacrifices. But we must also know that happiness, unbroken happiness, exchanged with the Supreme Person, the Personality of Godhead, as described in this verse, transcends the impersonal conception of the Upanishads. In the Upanishads, the description is more or less negation of the material conception of things, but this is not denial of the transcendental senses of the Supreme Lord. Herein also, the same is affirmed in the statements about the material elements. They are all transcendental, free from all contamination of material identification. And also the liberated souls are not devoid of senses. Otherwise, there cannot be any reciprocation of unhampered spiritual happiness exchanged between them in spontaneous, unbroken joy. All the senses, both of the Lord and of the devotees, are without material contamination. They are so because they are beyond the material cause and effects, as clearly mentioned herein. Sat asatam param. The illusory material energy cannot work there, being ashamed before the Lord and his transcendental devotees. In the material world, the sense activities are not without grief, but here it is clearly said that the senses of the Lord and the devotees are without any grief. There is a distinct difference between the material and spiritual senses, and one should understand it without denying the spiritual senses because of material conception. The senses in the material world are surcharged with material ignorance. In every way, the authorities have recommended purification of the senses from the material conception. In the material world, the senses are manipulated for individual and personal satisfaction, whereas in the spiritual world, the senses are properly used for the purpose for which they were originally meant, namely the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Such sensual activities are natural, and therefore sense gratification there is uninterrupted and unbroken by material contamination, because the senses are spiritually purified. And such satisfaction of the senses is equally shared by the transcendental reciprocators. Since the activities are unlimited and constantly increasing, there is no scope for material attempts or artificial arrangements. Such happiness of transcendental quality is called. We interrupt for some noise. Which will.
Dina, if this does not fall within 7 years, then I think that you will have done a great job.
only 7 years.
Like adjusted numbers. You know.
Yeah, people don't hang on it, then stay.
The building might collapse before that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare. It's okay, just have a little break. We're having some upgrades on the temple.
It was not a count, so you can do it now.
I understand what you.
How you are working.
There is one, yeah.
There's few, 2 or 3, I think.
I understand what you mean.
No, I'm just showing the new upgrades to temple.
Yeah,